conversations on this stage, some of you remember from last year, we talked about, is it time to have, or how do we get better representation of identity in the C-suite? One of the things about getting executive air cover is helping them get board-level air cover, right? There's a whole extra level of thought that goes into that. But that might be something we want to think about as an industry, is how can we help that part of the process? And the third thing is, I think I've started a trend, because I had the first telescope this time around, and then Matt's mentioning this one that's in space, and so telescopes, that's the thing. In all seriousness, thanks to Matt Griffith. So we've seen some ways that AI can help us over the course of the last few days, but it's also very clear that AI presents some very particular threats. And so what I'm hoping to do, I hope will happen in the next session, I'm sure it will, is to get a little bit more perspective on those risks and to talk a little bit about how we can start to mitigate those. So I'd like you please to welcome an identity thought leader, a long-time friend of Identiverse. In fact, he reminded me that he is one of a very, very small group of individuals that's been to almost every single one since the beginning. So that's fantastic, and I'm delighted to welcome him up here. He's also the Chief Product Officer at Arkose Labs, Ashish Jain.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you for joining. My name is Ashish Jain. I'm the Chief Product Officer for Arkose Labs. We do bot detection and account security. Prior to joining Arkose, I used to work for eBay, where I led identity, risk, and trust teams. And the charter of team included authentication, ID verification, payment and account fraud, KYC, and a number of things. As Andy mentioned, I've been part of this industry for a long time and very happy to be here today to share some of those learnings. I wanted to start with a personal story. In August of 2020, Nike released these pair of shoes to honor Kobe Bryant's legacy. The white, purple, and the teeth is to represent his high school colors. The insole had the name of the 13 teams that passed on him during the draft day. This was a very limited number of shoes, and my son, who was 15 years old and a freshman in high school at the time, wanted to have access to these shoes. Now the shoes will drop at 5 a.m. in the morning. My son wasn't going to get up that early. So he looked around and he found a bot. He configured it, set it up, and next day morning, he was able to buy those shoes for $445. He was super happy. The next day, he sold the same pair of shoes at eBay for $1,850. And since I used to work at eBay at the time, he did not even have to pay the commission or the seller fees. So over a weekend, he made $1,400. Now, my son, he's been part of this community also for a long time. I've attended 1 million yoga sessions here, played soccer his entire life, and he would referee on the weekends to make some extra money. In California, you make $15 to be a line, $35 to be a line referee. There are 2 seasons, one in fall, one in spring, and there are 10 games per season. So if you referee a game for every season, every game, entire year, you make $700. Now think about that for a second. If you're 15-year-old and you have 2 options, your first option is to wake up your parent every weekend, go to a soccer game, referee, where you get yelled at by the hyper-aggressive parents who all think what an offside rule is. You do that for the entire year and you make $700. Or you can make twice as much in a weekend without having to get up from the bed. What would you do? And that is the topic of the session today, that as this group and this community has been working together to build a good experience for the users, there is a lot of money on the darker side, and there is an alternative and equally committed set of identity professionals trying to break those defenses. We came together as a group, in the 2000 timeframe with Liberty Alliance, and we've had some major milestones along the way, from SAML to OAuth to OpenID Connect to now to passkeys and a bunch of stuff being done around verifiable credentials. I was going to make a very quick side comment on there's a joke that SAML is dead. It comes up literally every year at this conference. I wanted to just note that if SAML is dead, then I see dead people. Because I use SAML to log into my email provider this morning. So I digress. So coming back to here, just like we have been working hard to put together standards and protocols, there is the alternative side who started with simple curl scripts, got into phishing toolkits, eventually proxying, and then the browser applications to be able to spoof the fingerprints. We got together and we thought instead of single sign-on and multi-factor authentication and provisioning adapters as separate components, why don't we stitch them together and offer identity as a service? Well, they had a very similar idea that instead of proxy services, CAPTCHA solvers, spoofing applications, why don't we stitch them together and offer cyber crime as a service in a subscription model? And Genesis Marketplace and Evil Proxy are an example of that. We thought that if we come together as a community and collaborate and build together the standards and protocols, we did that across Voices, OpenID Foundation, FIDO Alliance, to name a few. Well, they also found value in sharing best tips and tricks and collaborating with each other. And as you can see, that the communities are fairly well thriving by the number of subscribers in each of those communities. Now, why do we think that there is such a thriving community of bad actors trying to attack the sites that we are building? And why do we think that year after year, the number of attacks continue to grow? There are three primary drivers that we see are happening today. The first one is the lower barrier to entry. The case of my high schooler is the point that how easy a newcomer can get in and make some more money. The second thing is that fraud has become a business, especially over the last few years, where there are very well-defined processes and mature life cycles and people managing the P&Ls and also recruiting other people to help with that. The third point is the rising complexity or the increasing sophistication of the tools available to fraudsters to be able to beat those defenses. We're going to touch upon each of these topics in the next 20 minutes. From a lower barrier to entry, if you are looking to buy a limited pair of shoes or you want to up your sneaker reselling game, this is a great place to get started. It's not free, but at the same time they claim they are very reliable. 400,000 pair of shoes have been bought using this site. If you want to do your own phishing campaign, this is an open source that you can download. In less than 10 minutes, you can download the tool, give it the URL you want, and pick any of the sites listed here. They will take care of all the style sheet and CSS management so that it looks like a real website. Once you have run your phishing campaign and you have a set of username and passwords, or you have been able to buy them from somewhere else, you can use this open source tool that can be used for credential stuffing, where you upload the username and the password combo list, give the URL, and the site will take care. If you get stuck, it's a very supporting community to help with best practices. Now, when you are running it, there is a possibility that the site may just put a CAPTCHA. You don't have to worry, because there are CAPTCHA solvers available there. The gig economy is not just for Uber and DoorDash. The gig economy is that where they can employ people in the low-wage countries to be able to solve them manually. And as you can see, you can buy 1,000 CAPTCHA solvers for as little as $1. And if you're wondering, you have choices. For each of the categories I mentioned, there are a number of options that you have that you can take your pick. These are some of the top ones that we get to see on a daily basis. Now, to illustrate this point even further, that the tools and services to attack are becoming a commodity, I want to invite someone on stage who has been dealing this on a very regular basis Manav, who leads the identity product team at Amazon. Manav.
Hi, Identiverse. I'm Manav. I lead the account integrity product team at Amazon on the prime and fast shipping side of the house. I'll talk about 3 trends that we're seeing on our side. So the first one is really the low cost of an attempt. This is evidenced by an increase in credential validation attacks, about 150% increase that we've seen over the past few years. We expect this trend to continue over the next few years too. The next one is the number of ways you can use an Amazon account. Bad actors can use Amazon accounts to monetize them. So there's your run-of-the-mill credit card fraud and its offshoots. So that's card testing and card enumeration. But then there's also policy abuse where bad actors fraud us because of our customer-friendly returns policies. There's SMS toll fraud, which Anuj will talk about in a little bit, but then there's also all of the ways that bad sellers create accounts to collude for sales abuse and ace and rank abuse and product abuse, etc. So the bottom line here is that once you create an account, or once a bad actor creates an account, there are many different ways to monetize it, and we also expect these vectors to keep increasing. The third trend that we're worried about is impersonation scams. So this is where a bad actor will impersonate an entity like Amazon, for example, they'll trigger an OTP to a customer's account and call the customer pretending to be Amazon and say, hey, you just received an OTP from us. Can you share that with us? And they'll phish the customer and get into their account and take over their account. This is one vector that really does keep us up late at night. So how are we solving for these wide-ranging attacks? One phrase that does get thrown around a lot is defense in depth, and that means 2 things to us. The first one is continuously evaluating accounts, so that's really going into and proactively, but also looking for anomalous behavior and separating out normal behavior from anomalous behavior. And when we see anomalous behavior, going in and diving in to understand, is this really a customer? Is this really a customer? Or are these potentially bad actors trying to monetize their accounts in some way? And the second one is marrying the right mitigation with the right type of attack. So for example, we know that we cannot solve sophisticated account takeovers using CAPTCHAs. So that second point is really important. So based on these techniques, we've actually been able to reduce account takeovers significantly over the past few years, despite the increase in credential stuffing and account enumeration attacks. The second point is contextual awareness, and this is really in the context of bringing the customer along. So I'll give you 2 examples that have been successful for us. So the first one is where we experimented with nudging customers to adopt 2SV, and we found that when we gave them the context about what could go wrong if they didn't improve the security of their account, they were much more willing to enable 2SV and MFA. And this was also in the experiment. This will be interesting for you guys, for product designers in the room, because it was the most verbose language that we used that had the highest success rate, which was an interesting tidbit. So bringing the customers along is really important. The second one is, as we find scam trends, we share those broadly with our customer base, and they need to be relevant because bad actors keep adapting their tactics as well, as you all will know. So as we find scam trends, we share them with our customers, and we've seen that, at least in part, that has helped us reduce scam reports by 15% year over year. The third point that I'll talk about is industry collaboration. So most recently, we actually worked with Microsoft to compile information about a group of scammers in India and pass that to law enforcement. And law enforcement was able to use that to bring down a scam call center and bring the perpetrators to justice. So I bring this point up because we are looking for more collaboration, because only when we are united as a group can we fight these bad actors. When we're in silos, bad actors can take advantage of us and will take advantage of us. So if you have opportunities or if you think of ideas that you think you can work with us on and will be mutually beneficial and beneficial for the fraud ecosystem, I would love to hear from you. And on that note, thank you very much. Back to questions.
Thank you, Manav. The second point I want to talk about is that how this has become a business over the last few years. I'm sure if you look around and hear the stats, that 40% of the traffic on your site is not legit. 1 in every 5 login attempts on your site is an account takeover attempt. And if you put that into numbers, phishing losses alone last year was $52 billion. The e-commerce fraud were over $200 billion across the industry. And the bank scams, and I will touch upon some of the specific ones later in the session, were over $400 billion. So if you're wondering why your overdraft fees are so high, somebody had to pay for those losses. Now, there's a specific type of attack which has become very common in the last few years, as many companies have enabled SMS as a two-factor authentication. That is called as the SMS tool fraud, also known as SMS pumping, or international revenue share fraud, where the scammers partners with the telco providers so that they can send large amount of SMS messages to the premium rate numbers. They get a share of that money, and you, as the site owner, ends up footing the bill. Now, if you're wondering that how come you and I collude within telco in Indonesia, well, you don't have to worry about that, because there are sites available where you can buy these premium numbers at bulk through an intermediary, and you can run your own attacks. And if you thought that, I can add SMS to avoid this mass registration because I have now an additional layer of defense, there are a number of sites where you can buy voice over IP or temporary numbers to be able to bypass those defenses to prevent fake registration. Now, to talk a little bit more about it, I want to invite somebody who has been living and breathing this SMS issue at a global level for the last few years. I want to invite Anuj Batra, who leads the identity team at Yahoo.
Hello, Identiverse. You guys hear me okay? Awesome. My name is Anuj and I lead the identity product team at Yahoo. I'm here to talk to you about SMS toll fraud. It is a very interesting fraud vector. Ashish mentioned that SMS toll fraud is a business. It's not just a business, it is a very thriving and profitable business. Right? So I want to start by just setting the stage and telling you a little bit about the scale at which Yahoo operates. You might be users, you might be aware of the brand, but just to give you a sense of size, Yahoo is billions of user accounts. Right? These are active accounts in our systems. On a daily basis, we see hundreds of millions of users use our systems. We are in over 250 countries, and this is important because SMS toll fraud is usually targeted at international businesses. And lastly, we are big on the internet, right? We're one of the top 5 Comscore digital media websites by traffic. These are facts you might already know about them, but what you might not know is that we have a huge SMS bill. Starting in 2020, we started noticing that bill go up, right? And it wasn't just going up slowly, it was doubling year over year, which gave us a lot of cause of concern. So we started looking deeper into the data, found some interesting insights I want to share with you. On this screen, it's a little bit hard to read, but you see a map of the countries where we saw a spike in SMS calls. When we looked deeper, we found some next level of data points which were important. So one thing, the volume of SMS we were sending, the number of messages was increasing. And the second thing was the cost per message was rising. Our telco partners kept marking up the price per message. So it was a double whammy essentially. We were paying both for volume and price. When we looked deeper, we saw unexpectedly though, there was not a rise in revenue we were making in these countries, or even active users in many cases, right? That you would expect if you're sending more SMS OTP codes, there's more legitimate users, but we didn't see that in this case. So one metric we started tracking at Yahoo is the revenue we make in each of these countries minus the cost of sending SMS, right? And keep in mind, this doesn't include the cost of serving email or whatever your product is. It's just revenue minus the cost of sending SMS. Even by that metric, we were upside down in the red in many of these countries. So you can use a similar metric to play detective and you go back and see if you're being targeted in many of these countries. Now, hopefully it piques your interest, and you might be wondering, are we actually a target? You probably fall in one or two buckets. Either you are a target, you're an international business and you use SMS. Either you are a target, you're aware you're doing something to remediate, or you're unaware. And that's the best kind of target for these abusers, right? Your telecom partner sending a bill that is going to some technical organization, they're not paying attention to it, and it keeps going up year over year. So how do you figure out if you are an active target? For one, on the last slide, asymmetric SMS geography is an important tool. Countries where you have no or low business, but the SMS cost is fairly high, that's a very important tool that you can use. The second one is signs automation. This graph on the bottom is kind of showing you some of the traffic patterns we saw during the summer times. It's not usually a consistent flow. It comes in waves, right? And you can use that also, again, to detect whether you are a target. You might be blocking traffic in one country, but they'll jump to a neighboring country and so on. And then the third one is velocity of SMS rate. So if you have a telco partner, you probably have already, or you should, set throttles by country to say if the SMS volume triggers way high over an hour, cut off the entire country, right? Or what you start noticing if you're being targeted is that these triggers happen often and very frequent. So that's another important one. And then the last one is super important because unlike other frauds, Ashish mentioned eBay, my sneakers, these fraudsters, they don't have anything to do with your business. It might be a small store, it might be a small website that has international phone numbers for SMS OTP, they are not targeted. But you can use that to your advantage. One thing we noticed is often we're sending these codes out, but these users are not coming back. They're not typing in those codes successfully. So you can use that to your benefit. Measure, track the success rates, and that'll clue you into where the abuse is coming from. So I'm not really talking about remediation here. I'm just giving you some symptoms you can use to play detective. If you have questions about how Yahoo is solving it or remediation, we did a full presentation yesterday. We're happy to share materials. Just find me or find anyone here from Yahoo, and we'd love to talk to you about it. With that, let me hand it back to Ashish.
The third point I want to talk about is the rising complexity and how the tools are becoming more sophisticated. Now, at a very high level, there are two types of attacks. The volumetric attacks, where the focus is on scale and conversion. Credential stuffing is an example of that. I get access to 10 million usernames and passwords. I try that across a number of sites. I get 1% conversion rate. That is still 100,000 accounts. The second type of attack are the social engineering, low and slow attacks. It takes a lot more effort, a lot more time, but the reward is also equally higher simply because these are more targeted. To share some examples of the volumetric attacks over the last few years, a common one that you may have heard of is the DraftKings case, where this was an 18-year-old out of Madison, Wisconsin. He got access to a username and a password list. He was able to hack into 60,000 accounts and pocketed $500,000. He was eventually caught, and then he described, "This is so easy and fraud is fun, and I got addicted to seeing money in my bank account." The second scenario was when PayPal announced that in their earnings call that they had to close 4.5 million accounts because they were fake. Now, PayPal initiated a scheme where if you sign up for a new account, you get $10. As it turned out, that scheme was a bigger hit with fraudsters than with the alleged leaders. And not only they lost the money in the campaign, but they had to take the extra effort to be able to clean those accounts. I'm sure you would have heard of this one, the Taylor Swift concert issues, where they wanted to sell the tickets. They did their best to open up only for verified fans. Before the ticket sale opened, 3.5 million pre-registered users were signed up for the tickets. The moment it opened, 40 million hits came on the very first 5 minutes. The site crashed, and the tickets were available on the secondary site for $20,000 the next day. In social engineering attacks, one very common one is what's called the grandparent scam, where you get a call from your son or grandson or daughter that I'm in trouble. I was driving the car, I hit a woman, she was pregnant, they're taking me to jail, please don't tell that, you're gonna be mad, can you pay 10K? And they do their homework so they can mimic the voice, they know the names of the family members. It makes it harder to suspect for elderly grandparents. That costed $3.3 billion in 2023. The second very common one is called as the romance scam, and the specific wording is called pig butchering, where it starts with you getting a text or a WhatsApp message over a period of time. They get to know you a little bit better, build some trust, ask you to invest some money into a crypto fund. You get some initial rewards, you end up investing more. Eventually, both the person and the fund disappears. That costed $1.2 billion in 2022, and that has been growing since then. The third common one is called the business email scam. In the simplest form, you get an email asking for some gift card from your boss or coworker. In this scenario, you get an email asking to transfer money to a supplier, $37 million, harder to suspect until it was too late. Now, these numbers are already too big, too huge. And then enters AI. Because what happens is that AI allows you to integrate the scale and volume of the volumetric attacks to the sophistication and intelligence of the social engineering attacks into a single motion. To give you some ideas and examples of how this has been evolving, the romance scam has up-leveled a lot in terms of what they can do. There are now chatbots available so that you don't have to engage yourself over a long period of time. You can now have fake images and videos so that it makes it even more believable. And if you can automate the whole process by using the chatbot and the image generation, it makes it scale much larger than what you can do otherwise. This is an example of the site. It's called Only Fake. You can go in, create an account for $15. You can get a synthetic identity. If you use that identity, you open up a credit card. Even if you get a starter credit card for $500 or $1,000 limit, you get 10% conversion rate. You still make 10x of your money. The third example, which is fairly recent, a person joined the call. They were his colleagues and CFO asked him to transfer $25 million. As it turns out, everybody in the call was being fake. So if figuring out that the email you got was not real, imagine joining a Zoom call with other people, asking you to take some action, only to find out later that all of that was being fake. And the challenge that we have at this team is that we have to kind of balance in between the growth and the risk. The PayPal is an example. The intentions were correct to incentivize the end users so that you can grow your numbers, have them understand the service, only to realize later that the risk and the defenses were not proper to be in place. Now, where do we go from here? Overall, there are three primary endpoints: registration, login, and account recovery, that are highly interconnected, and they should be treated as such. These are the first three endpoints your end user will come in and interact with. This is also the three endpoints that fraudsters will attack the most. We see oftentimes that you enable MFA for a login, but the account recovery is by a simple email reset. Or in order to lower the friction at onboarding, you do not ask enough questions, which potentially can be used later either for login options or recovery options. To build a comprehensive account security system, there are three primary pillars that you should take into account: authentication, authentication, verification, and fraud detection. There are plenty of strong auth options available today between SMS and push and email verification and now passkeys. And every auth option you have to balance in between security, usability, and the cost of maintenance. Having rolled out many of these options, I can tell you there is not really a silver bullet, especially if you have a large number of customer base and you have to support more than one. ID verification depends very highly on your business profile, helps you with personalization, detection, and compliance, things like anti-money laundering. You start with a very simple email email verification or phone verification, name and address matching, ID proofing, liveness test. This is one area where I feel like a lot of work and innovation is being done because of verifiable credentials and mobile driver license, and I fully expect 12 months from now, this to be a very different space. The third one is the fraud detection, where you can get a lot of passive signals via IP reputation, device fingerprint, behavior biometrics, phone and email scoring, and all of that can add as a second layer of defense without having any impact on your end user's experience. And eventually, all of them have to kind of work together to build a holistic system. At the end, I only have 2 recommendations or asks or suggestions. The first one is the shared KPIs, that if your growth team is trying to lower the friction to increase the conversion numbers, and your risk team is trying to raise the defenses for chargeback and account takeover losses, the proposals they're going to make will not align with each other, and that's where you will have to solve to have shared KPIs. The second point I want to make is that act now. I know there are a lot of standards architects in the room, and we have this tendency to be perfect. There is no end game here. Whatever we end up building, there will be either new attack vectors or challenges of adoption. So the only way to make progress is to get started, iterate faster, and continue to evolve on a regular basis. On that note, I want to thank you for your time and attention. Hope you found the session useful. We would love to continue the conversation later today or online. Thank you.